So welcome this morning to the Electronic Process and Access House Bill 2415 Rulemaking Advisory Committee. Whew, that was a long sentence. We are going to talk about the draft rule that we have that was sent out to everybody. Did everybody receive that before we get started? I want to make sure that everybody has the same information that I have. If you didn't, could you please raise your hand so we can get that to you as soon as possible? Not seeing any hands go up. No hands? Okay, great. Everybody has the same information that I have in front of me. I'm Terry Watson. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor with Building Codes Division. And I'm here with Selena Patterson, the e-permitting manager, and Nathan Kramer, sorry. And Laura Burns is also here remotely helping today. We're going to do a very quick introduction. So if we could go around the room real quick. Go ahead.
Certainly. Jake Wolf with Cloud Permit.
Can you turn on your mic?
Jake Wolf with Cloud Permit.
Okay.
Al Rossi, City of Salem, Building and Safety.
Okay. And let's see. We're going to have to figure out how to do this. So I'm going to ask Kelly Peterson to go next. And then when you do your introduction, could you pass it off to somebody else? Thank you.
Sure. Kelly Peterson with the City of Portland. Amy Umland, if you want to go next.
Thank you, Kelly. My name is Amy Umland. I'm also with the City of Portland, and I work on our electronic permitting system support. May I pass this off to Anna Esposito?
Hi there, Anna Esposito, also with the City of Portland, and I work on the Project Docs electronic plan review application. And I will, let's see here, pass it to, do we have Lee? We do not have Lee. I will pass it to Dave Tebow.
Hello, this is Dave Tebow. I'm with the City of Portland. I'm the Inspections Division Manager. And I will pass it to Stuart Ramsey.
Good morning. I'm Stuart Ramsey with the City of McMinnville, and I'll pass this to Jonathan in Albany.
I'm Jonathan Balkino with the Building Official Manager for the City of Albany. I'm going to get few things in Bergen because I'm not in Bergen.
Jonathan, we were having a hard time hearing you. Can you repeat that?
I'm Jonathan Balkino with the City of Albany, and I'll pass it to Penco.
Let's pass to Mike DeRoya, City of St. Helens.
I'm Mike DeRoya, City of St. Helens, Building Official, and I'll pass it off to Brady.
Hi, Brady. You're on mute if you are talking.
Let's pass it off then to the City of Pendleton, and we'll try Brady again in a bit. We're doing introductions. We'll pass it off to Randy from Deschutes County.
Okay.
We'll pass it off to Anne Marie, Lincoln City. You're on mute, Anne Marie.
I am Anne Marie Skinner. I'm the Director of the Planning and Community Development Department for Lincoln City.
If anybody else didn't introduce themselves and they want to just jump in and say your name and where you're from, we'd appreciate that so we can get everybody in the record.
My name is Randy Scheid. I'm Deschutes County building official, also the building official for the cities of Sisters and La Pine.
Hi, I'm Shweta Shukla. I'm from City of Portland, DS.
Alyssa Nichols, City of Woodburn, permit technician.
This is Warren Jackson with BCD. I'm only here because I couldn't live stream it, so I'm just kind of listening like the other one.
Hi, Lee Wheeler, Business Systems Analyst with City of Portland.
Anybody else out there who didn't introduce themselves? Going. Oh, go ahead.
I can go. I'm Matt Roselle, building official for the City of Portland.
Anybody else? It looks like maybe Deanna Wright. You want to introduce yourself, and then also, I don't think we ever got Brent.
Hi, I'm Deanna Wright. I'm with DLCD. I'm the NFIP floodplain coordinator for Oregon. I'm just listening in today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we're ready to go. I am going to hand it over to Selena now. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many people on the tablet in front of me and a couple of people here in the room as well. We're excited to kind of talk through these rules. I'm just going to start off with, obviously this is part of the implementation of House Bill 2415, which passed during the last legislative session, which in a nutshell requires jurisdictions to either be on e-permitting or a comparable system by the year 2025. And so the rules that we have drafted here and which we're looking for your feedback on are about really what is that comparable system. So, what features would a jurisdiction need to have if they are going to implement a system and not come on to e-permitting? And the approach that we took to it, the bill actually lays out a lot of the features that e-permitting already has. So in a way, that's kind of the starting point or the jumping off point for what a comparable system would be. But we looked at this rather than saying, here's technically, what your technology needs to have. We tried to draft it more as outcomes. The bill was, obviously put forward by the contractors associations looking for certain outcomes, certain types of services from local jurisdictions electronically. And so these rules are trying to say, again, this is what e-permitting delivers for the contractors and what's listed in the bill as being desired to be received. And so any comparable system, whatever technology you're going to use, whatever software, whatever sets of services, just has to be able to deliver this type of electronic customer service. So I think we can just go through. I'm just going to, we'll start a little bit with the purpose and scope, but the real meat of the rules is in the electronic system minimum standard portion. So basically we started off with, we have to do this because we're required to by the bill. The definitions, e-permitting is the division's electronic system. Comparable one means a system that is not e-permitting but meets all the minimum standards listed in the rule that we're going to talk about in a second. Online means connected to or available through an electronic system or telecommunication system, such as the internet. Again, it's very difficult to get a real definition of that. And then here's where we get into the electronic system minimum standards. And again, looking at the idea of these are what the customer can expect. And so it says the electronic system minimum standards must be adopted and functional by January 1st, 2025. That was in the bill. And section 1 says e-permitting or a comparable electronic system must be able to provide the public with 24-hour continuous online access, except for planned maintenance and temporary outages due to unforeseen circumstances and they must provide access to the following activities. And so searching for permit and inspection data, submission of permit applications and plans, payment for permit applications, tracking of plan review revisions and approvals, and the scheduling of inspections, tracking of corrections to inspections, and receiving inspection approvals. The second section says e-permitting in a comparable system must also be able to provide, and this is more directed towards, rather than an outcome for the customer, this is more of a jurisdiction needs to be able to provide an electronic markup and review of electronically submitted plans and contractor license verification, as well as tools for inspectors to provide electronic field inspections, construction progress inspections, and on-site verification of compliance with building code requirements. So that's the meat of the rule. I want to throw that open then for discussion for people's thoughts of language tweaks or overall ideas about that language, things that should be added, things that should be taken away. And put your hand up. I know there's a lot of people and it's hard electronically, but any thoughts? It's going to be the world's quickest big meeting ever. There we go. Jonathan.
Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? So, can you guys hear me this way?
Yes. Jonathan, we can hear you. Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
perfect. All right. So I guess looking at the draft rules, I don't really have any huge issues with them. 2C, I think is a little vague. I think the last meeting you guys had referenced the intent of the electronic field inspections was more being able to result them in the fields, and that way contractors can get the quick notices and those sorts of things. You might want to rephrase that if that is truly the intent, because just saying tools is rather vague, which is nice, so you don't have to rewrite rules, but it's also confusing because contractors may think that they're going to have an expectation across the board, across the state, that everybody's going to do something that is not currently DCB's intent. So that would be my suggestion.
So you're thinking more, so again, that is your suggestion more that, well, so in section 1, it says the scheduling of inspections, the tracking of corrections to inspections, and receiving inspection approval, so that the customer has to be able to receive that or be able to get that, kind of online continuously. I think the intention of this portion was more that in order to have that be real time for customers, jurisdictions need to have the tools available for doing that. Do you think that, but you think that's a little?
Well, that's where I was thinking, that's where I'm thinking, if C's really intended just to do the one portion, basically, limiting, if my suggestion, I guess, would be to limit the tools for inspectors to provide or update, field inspections, those sorts of things. Because again, the way this is worded, and I know the bill is worded in a particular manner, it could interpret that the intent is that you want us to be able to have video inspections, you want us to be able to do photo inspections as part of the tools, quote unquote, not resulting inspections, giving those real-time updates and those. That it sounded like from the last meeting was the intent.
Okay, so you're suggesting kind of striking the end of it, saying something more like C, tools for inspectors to provide or update electronic field inspections?
Or maybe even just take out the electronic, or move it so it's more in the context of tools for inspectors to electronically update results or blah blah of inspections to make it so it doesn't sound like we're doing it in electronic inspection.
I got you. So electronic tools, but not to get away from the idea that that might be a video requirement. So it's an
Correct.
electronic tool. Gotcha. Okay. I think we could make a tweak to the language to clarify that.
Thank you.
Did you have other suggestions or
Nope,
comments?
I think the other part looks nice.
Anne Marie, it looks like you have your hand up.
Yes, I have a question. I don't think I heard this, but maybe I missed it. Is there some requirement proposed that anyone in the public be allowed have the ability to look up any permit?
It does have a requirement for them to be able to look up permit applications, again, building permit applications, yes.
Why is that? Why do we have that? Why does someone feel the need to have that requirement?
It was in the bill. So that goes back to the legislature. It was part of House Bill 2415, and that was part of the language that came from the bill. Is that correct, Selena?
Well, yeah, and it's also part of just the access for information in order to be able to schedule inspections, do basic, have the applications be online. It also, part of that is being able to look at those applications and find them and to find the status updates for them.
I think if I can, one of the confusing parts for me was, are we providing global access to any user in the community to search up that record information? And is that the language that's in the bill? Or is it more of, if you're going to apply, we need all that data available online? I think one of the things that, just from the software perspective, are there any limits or limitations to the data that we're making available about parcels or identifiable information on these applications? Are we limiting that in any way? And if we aren't, who really is the beneficiary, I guess, of the search lookup? I'm just kind of curious.
I don't know that this doesn't say exactly what information has to be available about each of it, each permit that is online. That would be, I think, up to the discretion of individual jurisdictions. And obviously there are, provisions to hide certain applications for public safety purposes as well. I think part of it was just, I know from the e-permitting experience that the public searching for realtors use it a lot. Lots of people use the system to see where permits are being pulled, and many jurisdictions appreciate that they don't have to handle those phone calls, right? That information is there. It does not mean that you'd have to display every bit of information about each permit application in order to list that there's a permit at a particular site. That's kind of public record, right? So what's being displayed is the stuff that somebody could come to your office and ask for through a public records request, right? What were your, Anne Marie, what were your particular concerns about that?
Well, I only have one concern, and that is the fact that I do not like e-permitting. It's a terrible system, and I've found one that's perfect, only it does not have that. That is the only thing that it doesn't have. So I'm stuck with e-permitting, and I'm very sorry about that.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that you feel that way about that. I think I remember that it also didn't take online payments, but you and I can have some further discussions about where you can get with that. Anything particular about why having public access to searching? So it really is just about your desire to have another system, not about the idea that public.
Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, the cloud permit just doesn't have that particular feature yet. I guess working on it, but they don't have it. So
all right.
I'm very disappointed because it's a perfect system. It's very user-friendly. It's easy. It checks all the boxes. It does everything that we need it to. But I'm not going to be able to use it. So I'm very, very, very sad about that.
Anything additional? Okay, I think Matt Rozelle, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, thank you. I had a question on 2B, contractor license verification. We've run into this where the LCB contractor licenses are not, in with the BCD licenses, which causes some issues. Has the state looked into, with those different licenses, incorporating those into our upload that we do every day?
So I think from the previous discussions that this committee had, one of the things that that we committed to do was trying to get all of the different entities to upload their data to oregon.data.gov. So not so much through the BCD upload that you get, but by making, having all of the data available in one place for folks to be able to access that data to load into their system.
Okay.
Would that meet your needs?
I think that would. I would have to double check with our team, but I think it's getting there. As long as we have the opportunity to find that would help.
Yeah, I mean, I think the language clearly doesn't prescribe how you do contractor license verification, because I know there are many, that's some of the discussion that we had was, how do people assemble those licensing loads and access them? And obviously you don't have to have one. You could verify, by going to each system. Obviously that's time intensive, but there's a requirement to do that anyways, whether you were taking a paper application or an electronic application. But we have committed to we've already had that discussion with CCB. They have agreed that it is in their plans to post their licensing load to oregon.data.gov, so people will be able to access that there. And we will talk to some of the like LCB as well. I know we've had some difficulty just kind of keeping those licenses up to date for our load that we do, which unfortunately the permitting load is formatted in such a way that it does not make, the way in which we do our load would not make sense to be able to make that publicly available to other folks to do. But we can certainly work with our source to get them to post that on oregon.data.gov. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
Can I talk to that too a little bit, Selena?
Sure.
That to me seems like a really critical piece. If that we're defining these requirements, can we get an API? Is there a way to develop an interface for other vendors or other systems to access that same data?
Unfortunately, we had a discussion about API. Unfortunately, these are all different systems. So they're not, and the idea of having APIs for each individual system is just not tenable. And so that's oregon.data.gov does give you that option. And that's why it's not the perfect solution, but it's a better solution. And if they're all consolidated in one spot. So ours, the building codes division licenses are already published there. CCB, we did meet with them. That's the other big piece to have there. And they have committed to making sure that those get up there.
Excellent.
And then there's architects, engineers, landscape contractors, I think would be the other three remaining, to see if we can get them to post their licenses, and maybe septic installers if folks are interested in that as well. So
excellent.
Let's see, I think Randy from Deschutes County may be next.
Hello there. I had two quick items. One is to Matt Rozelle's question about the licensing. When we had our in-house program that we switched to e-permitting from, it was a 30-year-old program that we had tweaked, and it checked for the licenses from both. And that was one thing we noticed that was different with the e-permitting, that we kind of stumbled on at the beginning because we weren't confirming one or the other licenses. We also, have to check for state fire marshal license for LPG. So it would be nice if that could all be worked into e-permitting. We're I believe one of the largest standard model users of it, and we absolutely adore the program and the support we receive from e-permitting. To the person from Portland's concern, we run kind of a maybe not only e-permitting, but we also have dial.deschutes.org, which is where 24 hours later, everything is uploaded. and we have public facing pages to fulfill these obligations, but we can also protect copyrighted material or floor plans. You know, I mean, we always say here that, you know, we don't need to show where the nursery in the house is at, or where the money is kept in a bank, or the buds are kept in a marijuana facility. I mean, those are things we do not face forward. But the other things allow realtors to do their due diligence, allows the home buyers to do due diligence, because we really cannot compel people to final their projects. We can't make them earn more money or have more time to get it done. So this is a way we inform future purchasers and the public on where that structure was at when we were last engaged with it. And I think that electronic access for potential buyers, for anyone involved in that property, is critical. And that's just my opinion. What I'm trying to express is that maybe it's a hybrid. Maybe if you have a system you like, you go with that system, but then you have like we do, that dial.deschutes.org backup where we can display this stuff to the public. Anyway, thank you.
And agreed, Randy. I mean, that is part of why the rules are written this way, is to provide some flexibility in terms of, it's not telling you how you meet these requirements, right? It could be a primary system that doesn't provide that public access, but you provide a secondary system that does provide that, right? So this does not, it's designed to try to provide some flexibility for people building that comparable system, just as long as they meet the customer outcomes. So thank you, Randy. Lee Wheeler from the City of Portland.
Yes, let me lower my hand before I forget. The question that I had, and I think you've answered it, but maybe you could just verify. I wanted to check to see, do we have to have one system? Or can the intent of the bill be met by like more than one system?
Well, I think, so electronic system, even in e-permitting, is made up of different tools. So I think, this does not preclude, I mean, and many jurisdictions, are currently having project docs for their plan review system and maybe something else for their permitting system. And again, this is written just with customer outcomes in mind. Can the customers get the services that they've been asking for through these bills, which is online access to this? And I don't think there's anything that says that, two systems can't do that for folks. And that's kind of also to Randy's point of saying, public access to your permitting information can be provided in multiple different ways. That Deschutes County is doing that. They've got e-permitting, but they've also got this Deschutes system where their customers and their citizens can look up information. And I think that does meet the intent of the bill. I mean, on the other hand, one of the things that we did here with all of the surveys that we did of the contractors and the design professionals was the desire for ease of use, and that sometimes it's difficult for folks to manage all of the different types of requirements that jurisdictions have. But again, this language does not preclude what you're asking there. So.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question, and it kind of circles back to the licenses. And what so for perspective, I am the DevHub workstream lead for Portland. And so we, what I'm trying to do is validate our licenses so that people are getting the correct permit and they have the correct licenses, that when someone has a permit, we verify that they are allowed to do the work. And what I've run into is a challenge with the BCD licenses, as far as who can be a supervisor for what. And I was just wondering if and you may not know this, are they simplifying how their licenses work at all? I'm particularly looking at QP licenses, which can cover electrical or plumbing, it seems like, and that is really hard to program for.
I think maybe you and I should have a discussion offline, because I think this was raised in one of the previous meetings, and we were going to actually have a follow-up meeting about, because it sounds like that you at the city have programmed your system to almost to do a lot more checking than say e-permitting does. We look at the contractor license level. Do you have the electrical contractor's license for the work? And it sounds like you may have drilled down a little bit more, and maybe there are some changes to be made there that could simplify things to make your job a little bit easier and to make the licensing process a little bit easier for folks. The other thing that we'll talk about it a little bit later in terms of what the next steps are after this. But one of the things that was kind of asked for from BCD, which we will be sending out sometime during 2023, is just a simplified, not for all of the trade licenses, but a simplified kind of like a cheat sheet of the different contractors' licenses, the electrical and the plumbing contractors' licenses, and kind of the scope of work for each of those, which might go a little bit to what you're talking about. But I think if I remember from our previous conversation, the way in which your system is built, it may be a little bit, you might be able to ease up on that a little bit, and come a little bit more in line with how e-permitting and some of the other jurisdictions are doing the contractor license verifications to give a little bit more flexibility. So I would say let's have a meeting, sometime after this meeting, just between Portland and BCD and talk a little bit about that.
That would be super helpful. I want to be consistent with like other areas in the state, so our customers have a consistent experience. And then also ease of programming would be super helpful. And thank you very much.
Absolutely. Okay. David Tebow.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just had a quick question around the minimum standards. This is getting back to the permit search piece of it, where it also mentions inspections data. And we currently, you can view the results of the inspections, but you can't access the correction notices. And my fear is that word data is pretty broad. And I, maybe throw out the idea of maybe changing that to inspection results. We currently email those correction notices, directly to, the person of interest, whether that be the contractor or the homeowner. And so they do have access to it, but it's not broadly accessible by everybody. And I think in my mind, data kind of covers all of that, right? Covers inspections, covers results, covers correction notices. And I'd kind of like to not have that lumped in with that portion of it, because we currently do not have that capability.
I guess I'd like to have other jurisdictions on that. We in e-permitting do have that, partly because, and we certainly, I know from our help desk, we certainly get people, they get the emails and they get get that notification, but they still somehow didn't get that notification. And so they're coming to the website looking for that information to figure out their corrections. But I'd like to hear from other jurisdictions about that concern and whether people that think that's appropriate to have as a requirement.
Well, I think Dave's I think Dave's correct in the way his concern is, which is, because we use the solidly software too, but we're self-hosted. So the result is shown on our website, but the actual correction notice we did do just like they did, which is it's a separate email, with our fancy logos and all the fluff that we want to put on it. So it is two separate elements. So to Dave's point, you could construe that the data is you want access to both of those, even though we're giving the inspection result, which is the correct thing on our website.
So Jonathan, if a customer, so when you say result, it just would say something like failed and.
No, it still has the comments and stuff like that. Okay. It's just not think of it the old paper way. They're just not seeing the correction notice itself. They're seeing a digital representation on the website where we do a separate email like David.
Well, I'm thinking along lines with you, but I don't know, was that Dave? Is that what Jonathan is saying, is that, are you talking about like an official correction notice, or are your customers able to see online what corrections they need to make?
That's a good question. Kelly Peterson, are you still available online?
Yes, I am. I don't believe they currently have access to view the correction notice online, and that's where they would see those actual corrections.
Right. So when
Yeah.
we have a customer that wants or hasn't received the correction notice, they call the office, and then we get that sent out to them, or figure out why it didn't get sent out in the first place. But currently, we just don't have that capability of having that visible. To my knowledge, anyway. I mean, and Kelly or Amy, if you guys want to chime in, if I'm wrong about that.
Last I checked with Dwayne on what was accessible from the public on the correspondence, that particular item wasn't. So, yeah.
And that may be a bit of a heavy lift if that's if that's the direction that we're, that the group is going.
I think
for consistency.
Yeah, I think the intent is that people can be able to access the information about what needs to be done to fix an inspection online. If they're not, there are definitely issues with email communication, which is why the idea is that you look at stuff online. But again, that's why we're having a discussion. What do other people think? What other jurisdictions think? Do you have something here? I got Salem.
Well, yeah, we're fully electronic on everything, and as we've morphed into the product we have now, we generate a permit folder electronically, and all of the inspector notes, all of the plans, everything is all in one bucket. And so once inspectors are done with their portion of what they need to do, then they will put their notes into this folder electronically, and the customer can log into their account, which actually all their accounts, so all their permits, even their water bills, all tied into one account. They can log in, they can look up the permit, and they can pull up and they can see in real time what the inspector's notes were, the cite it, write it comments. They can look at plans examiner notes as they transgress. And it's all done. When things are finalized, our permitting up front, they will go ahead and shoot out emails. And they'll advise people, log in your portal, you have new information, and then they can move forward from that. It's pretty streamlined. We don't have a whole lot of negative feedback about it.
Right. And so to be clear, then the accessibility isn't to the general public. That's somebody that's diving into their own account and folder to be able to see those corrections, and not necessarily the neighbor that doesn't like this project that's going on, that just wants to pick apart, or latch on to corrections that may or may not have any bearing on their concerns.
And that's paramount, because honestly, we're violating privacy rights. So what we have to do when they log into the people who have access to these particular folders during the construction phases are the people who have been listed on the application. So it can be the owner, the architect, the engineer, maybe a person of interest, that type of thing. And those are the only people who have access to the accounts, and they log in with their password. They get all that information. It's not, that side of it is not exposed to the public. Keeps all the privacy. We have some big projects coming in that we don't even know who they are until, we start turning dirt. And so
right.
It's a big thing to maintain privacy through the process, and just let whoever's on the applications have access to these folders.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I would be interested in hearing kind of how everybody else does that as well, because like I said, that will be a bit of a lift for us to make that happen, I believe.
Anybody else want to chime in on just specifically on this issue of inspection results or corrections and public access to those, because the way it's currently written, this is saying public access to that, which would not align with what I hear you saying. And I know some other systems that I've seen in the state, they're, are a little bit more buttoned down. Is that something, what do people think about that?
I wouldn't mind saying something, Selena, if you wouldn't mind. Other than like I talked about the things that we do not have forward facing, we kind of, I believe, feel that all this is public record, and that it also fulfills our statutory requirements to leave inspection results at the job site by having it done. And through the e-permitting app, you could check on anyone's CCB or any address that's that is in our system that we've used, and it is a public record. It's a public document. It's other than copyrighted, or when we do have when we first got some of the high-end social media people coming to town, they didn't want their names associated with it, so we'd have workarounds, but it's still, we do our inspections, our plan reviews, and the results are public.
Anybody else want to chime in? Mike, I see your hand up. Is that, or do you want to speak about something different or about this issue specifically?
I had a separate couple of comments to make. I don't really have anything to add on this.
Okay, I won't forget about you. Do other people want to weigh in about this question about inspection corrections being available online? Publicly accessible versus privately accessible, I guess. Jonathan? Yeah.
Just to clarify, for ours, all of ours is publicly accessible. We do require that they have an online account, which is free access to anybody. So that's the only caveat for us, is they just have to create an account to see the inspection records. But anybody can see anybody's record, because like Randy was mentioning, our city attorney takes the exact same approach. There's very limited things in statute that we're allowed to prohibit public access for, so why make them with your public records request? And that information should be.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that question of the public accessibility of inspection corrections?
Yes, hi, I'm Stuart Ramsing, the city of McMinnville. I would just add that I think there's benefit to give the ability to put a barrier between full untended public access and some more restrained access for reasons we're not really concentrating on. But as systems become more sophisticated, the ability to go in and grab phone numbers, email addresses, other information that is part of our back and forth on corrections, maybe other sensitive information. I believe it's all public record and should be accessible, but not that some bot on the other side of the world could be screening or scraping that type of information. And I don't have specifics, but one way just to eliminate that is to not allow it to be anonymous. That's above and beyond, but I think I'm a little concerned about making that a minimum standard for the system, and then allow communities to wrestle with this issue, which continues to evolve and will continue to evolve for some time to come, about how freely and anonymously available is public information.
But I guess, I agree with you, Stuart, 100% about not making available information that would be, we do not post phone numbers and we do not post email addresses on e-permitting, right? So those, you can publicly search for inspection corrections and you can see who owns the home, because that's public record as well. You can go to the county assessor and find out who owns the home too.
Yeah, and maybe that covers it. I just wanted to make sure that as a correction notice, right now, we come from the old paper model. We've evolved to the point where it has the name of the inspector, it has their email and phone number as follow-up. That may not be where we're going. I just didn't want that to be unintended.
And I don't think, so maybe we need to clarify the language a little bit. I think that it's not, and I'm hearing like from Jonathan also that there's a difference between a correction notice and somebody being able to come in online and see that a correction is required and what those elements are. And I don't think there's a requirement that the correction notice be posted online. I think it's just that the customer needs to have access to the information they need in order to know what's gone wrong, right? And those are two different things. Just like I don't think anything in this bill is saying that people have to give public access to plans, right? That is certainly not something, but you do need to be able to track the status of your plan review, right? Those are two separate things, just like the correction notice versus the actual elements of it, that those, one of them is absolutely appropriate to be kept private and confidential. You do not want phone numbers or email addresses, floating out there on the web. And you don't want necessarily people's plans floating out there on the web, also just totally available to everybody. And I think we are trying to kind of walk that line there. So
I think that's where I come from, right, Selena? It's how do we provide customers with the great experience that they need and expect, but also how do we protect the data to not disclose anything and everything? Because from the software side, we go out on an inspection, we're logging a whole lot. And you can log internal notes and public facing notes and all these different data elements. Is all of that public record? Is every facet of that need to be dumped out into a data set where, a realtor could go look up and search? And I guess that's my question. How much do we really need to make available online? And is there any parameter around that? And I think it falls both within the permit itself and in the inspection side.
Well, I mean, I think the language here is written to make it to not mean that you've got to put everything in there. It's just saying you have to schedule inspection, track the corrections, right? So that just means you got to know what's wrong, right? Not necessarily that does not mean you have to have the correction notice online per se, and receiving inspection approval. So that's your result, right? And that gets to what a realtor is going to be looking for. Was a permit pulled? Was it finalized out and approved, right? And for a customer to be able to come in and see, here's why I failed that inspection, but not necessarily all of the detail that you would be finding in an inspection correction notice. And I don't think, again, this is the minimum standards. If somebody wants to post all that, a jurisdiction wants to have the correction notice online, they certainly can. But I don't think this language is saying that you have to provide the notice per se up there. And I agree. I think the protection of people's any place where you have that individualized contact information is something that you would want to consider long and hard about putting online. And we certainly don't, any permitting put that stuff or have that as a practice that you can access that stuff by the public. So any other people's perspectives on this one particular question of inspection correction notices, or maybe the broader question of public access to documents, privacy, et cetera, in terms of the bill language or the rule language that we have here in front of us? Important discussion.
This is Stuart again. I'll just add, I have an idea, a hunch that this might get future attention over the next years and decades. So taking a number of these, but specifically on that one, and breaking those out into separate sub items, so that it would be scheduling inspections, and a new item, tracking correction of inspections, and a new item, receiving inspection approvals, just so that over time, if there are amendments to the rules, it doesn't keep renumbering the whole stack. Not that you can totally eliminate that, but it allows those items to be discrete. It's just a thought. I haven't really thought through the downside of that either.
We'll take that back to our rule writers extraordinaire and see what they think about that. There may be reasons not to, they usually just do strike out with that, but there might be reasons too. So we'll run that by our policy shop. Any other thoughts about this specific issue? And then let's hand it over. Mike, it sounds like you had some additional comments that you wanted to make about the rules.
Yeah, just maybe some questions, some stuff I'd throw out to the group. Firstly, on the part two, part one, section B, submission of permit applications and plans for 24-hour continuous online access. I'm just wondering how that affects, we are on the e-permitting system, how that affects like revs and deferred submittals, which are currently not something, a record type that can be applied for via their e-permitting access. It's something they have to contact us directly during business hours. So that would not be a 24-hour access piece. And then on that, if there is any necessity, or if anybody sees the necessity to kind of put some language in there in regards to the standards at which, documents need to be uploaded. And I'm just thinking in general, just that, that the participating jurisdictions, uploading policies or standards be followed, something along those lines.
It sounds like that was for the group. For any thoughts about, some types of permit applications that would not be available 24/7. I guess I think of the deferred submittals and phase permitting as part of the initial permit would have been applied for, and that's kind of an add-on. So I guess I didn't see it that necessarily that way, but what do other people think about that? Is there something we need to do about that?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
So in the two different jurisdictions that I worked at, we've handled it different ways depending on the location. In Corvallis, we actually just created a new record type that was referred, I think, to as the first submittal. I can't remember what the acronym was, but that's what people would apply for. The permit text, we just deal with it the next business day. In Albany, we actually just have them upload it, and the document type actually tells us that it's a deferred submittal or those sorts of things. So that way they can still handle the after hours business, because, just like Bill wants, we want customers to be able to do their job wherever they're at in the world, whether it's on vacation or whatever. They can handle their projects, and we'll handle our stuff as soon as we're in the office.
Any other thoughts or anything in terms of the plan, the idea of some kind of language about plans need to be, I don't know, this language is more about like the activities that one has to do, and that's more of a standard. I don't know if that this is the place. That seems like those standards are per individual jurisdiction more than something that it becomes a requirement in the rules. I'm not sure how we would be able to do that for all of the jurisdictions, but
Yeah, not looking for the standards specifically to be written into the rules, but just, I guess, some language in there that there are going to be policies that the administering jurisdiction that will need to be followed. I guess this is probably just more because we are moving through all this e-permitting and electronic plan review. So these are a little bit of some of the struggles that we've had as we're trying to go through this. And so I guess I was just looking to see if there was language that could be written into the rules that would refer to that. I understand, though, that we don't want to put the standard in there because there's too many participating jurisdictions that need to make it work for all of them. I had one other, I guess, comment that I can't remember who made the comment. It was right out of the gates about tools for inspectors to provide electronic field inspections. I kind of wanted to just add to that or expand on that a little bit. When it talks about tools for inspectors to provide electronic field inspections, one thing I haven't seen in any of the language and I haven't heard in conversation is standards for issuance. Is there an expectation that contractors have electronic versions of this on site, or that we come with electronic versions to be able to provide those field inspections? Or is there an expectation that paper is still acceptable, or is that something that the jurisdiction will be able to just set by their own policy?
I think the language, which is kind of tracks the bill, is that the idea is that the tools are that what the expectation is somewhat real-time inspections, right? And so whether that's a laptop or again, we did not want to specify what that tool needed, what that electronic tool needed to be, but the idea is that the expectation expressed in the bill is for those real-time inspection results are as close to real-time as possible. And it's kind of hard to know how to write that in there. But that's kind of is the intent of that segment there. Did you have any additional thoughts?
That's all I had on.
Okay. Lee, you have your hand up?
Yes, I had one more question. I just wanted to verify, is this rule specific to building permits? Our jurisdiction has rather a lot of permits. And I was just curious as to whether this was specific only to like building and trades, or if it included all permits that we offer to our public.
No, this is just building. This is right. This is building codes division rulemaking. So this is all just about building. Yeah.
That would extend also like planning. We're not really talking about accepting a planning application. This is a building permit.
This is building permits only, right? We are not talking about planning requirements, public works, any of that stuff, just building departments. That is the scope of this rulemaking.
One thing, if I can, lots of different forms, lots of different application types, right? And it seems like the municipalities all have slightly different flavors of their own forms. Is that fair?
Yes.
Is there, right? And that's really difficult to manage because we're expecting the same data from the end user. We're asking different questions. And then how do we store and manage all of that? I guess that's where I get into, when we talk permit applications, is there a standard? Is there some kind of standard that we can make available for all the different permit types? If you're going to apply for this, regardless of it, whether it's Salem or Newburgh or Portland, you're going to complete this data set for us. We need to make that online. What do you think?
Well, e-permitting does that, but that for the jurisdictions that participate in it, I think it's up to each jurisdiction. I think one of the things that which we'll talk about in terms of next steps, is some potentials. We would love to partner with jurisdictions to kind of put forth some best practice guides, which would not be mandatory requirements, but more aspirational, because there are definitely advantages to every jurisdiction. The more consistent we are, the fact is software changes, and the chances are that you may have to do a data conversion or move to another system at some point in time. And the more consistency we all have in our data, the more we streamline it, the more cost effective and easier that process is. But again, the way I think the approach will be to kind of see what the appetite is to kind of develop some best practices amongst all of our jurisdictions in the state. Stuart, I see you have your hand up.
I do. Regarding item 1B, submission of permit application and plans, I would again suggest that this be broken into two items: submission of permit applications, and a separate one, submission of plans. Because again, I might anticipate over time that these might get some tune-ups. Regardless of whether that happens or not, I'm going to push to keep upping our game here, and I'd replace the word submission with make application online or something like that. The reason I call that out is I think we'd satisfy this requirement if one emailed a paper application. That would be the submission. And I want to make it more interactive. I think, as we're probably assuming it is, we're using old lingo because I think we come from that paper era. So it's more than submission. It's about making online application, not just submittal. And then with regard to the second half of that, plans, I would, just to make sure there's no confusion, I would say, submit all permit related documentation. We're moving into a world when it's way beyond plans. This could be it's way beyond plans. And it could even include future video or not. I'm not saying it does now, but I want the system to accommodate the evolving world and not be stuck in what we call plans.
I think that's a good feedback. Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense to make that change.
Okay, now if I can go on item 1D, tracking of plan review, revisions, and approvals, I might suggest we take the word review out of that sentence, because I think it can raise questions that don't need to be added to this. And what we want is a system that tracks revisions and approvals. Revisions of whatever it be, that's an issue. And I don't know why review is relevant. If someone chooses to voluntarily submit a revision, I'm not sure where I'm going. I have experience sometimes in our deep corners of our state, we'll have someone that says, if it's not related to plan review, we don't have to track it. Maybe I'm overworking it.
I would ask that I'd actually purposely kind of thought the review was an important word in there because if it said tracking of plan revisions and approvals, since we don't necessarily want to require that the plans themselves, as in the plan revisions, be publicly accessible. You know, I guess we were thinking a little bit about not having the document available, but having the comments, kind of like inspection comments versus the notice. The idea here is that the customer is able to see the review, know what the comments are, and that there is an approval or that there's that it's still in review versus the idea that they would be able to see the plan revisions per se.
Then I entirely misunderstood that, which might be a good flag here, because when we look at this in the future without the context of today, I was looking at it as tracking plan revisions, which is an ongoing current thing. You're talking about something different.
Yeah, so maybe this needs do other people think that there's some kind of language change that needs to happen to clarify that or to think about what that, so maybe it's more like the status of plan reviews, to track the status of your plan review and the corrections to it and versions versus the way it's currently written. Do people agree with the change of that kind of change? Status, I'm seeing nods in this room.
I would agree. Status uses the lingo that we use in our world. And there's a separate issue that we don't need to address, is the minimum standard of tracking plans and revision control and all, which I'd love it to do, but that would exceed the legislative minimum.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
Vision backing up the mainly and clearly see version 1. Yeah, and that was the final and standard. Really, we can throw those all in a permit.
We can't hear online those comments being made right now.
The mic on. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think what we're talking about here is the status of plan review, where it is in its status in the reviews, what the approval is, et cetera. The revision tracking that, again, we're not talking about public access necessarily to all of the plans. That's a jurisdictional decision about that portion of things, which would be the same for the revisions and et cetera. So I think that change will help clarify that a bit. So good call, Stuart. Any other thoughts, any other comments about any portions of the rules, things that need to be clarified, concerns? Going, we feel so with some changes to potentially to the Stuart has suggested changing, kind of breaking out some of the portions of the language here. That last change about the status of inspections, and also Jonathan had raised the question about that 2C, kind of clarifying that what we're talking about is having kind of electronic tools versus doing electronic inspections per se. So to clarify that we're talking about the ability to be able to do some real-time inspections resulting versus necessarily having a requirement that there be video inspections, which it is not. This is not intended to make that a requirement as for this at this point in time. So anything else? Again, so I think we see those changes. We'll take those back.
Do we need a caveat on 2C around when available? If we get into a area without cell signal, do we have something?
I think that's why it's written into the rule, except for planned maintenance, temporary outages due to unforeseen circumstances. I mean, I think that's why we wrote that into the rule, because there are things that Selena and I talked about that we knew that you'd be out in places that you couldn't, there are no service.
And those tools, right, exactly. And the tools, you can provide those inspections. Exactly. I mean, you can have your tool out there, and if there's no service, obviously you can't upload, but you can still be performing it real time and you do it as close to as possible.
Yeah.
I don't know how we, yes, I don't know how we make that any more clear without being too specific in ways that we don't want to impede
don't wanna-
people's flexibility.
Yeah.
Right.
Put people in a corner. We don't want to do that. Yeah.
Any other thoughts? And also, I hear we have some questions about the licensing, nothing that affects the language of the rules, but again, just kind of long-term, helping, making sure that folks have access to that data as in the best way possible. And I also heard Randy say he'd like the LPG licenses and e-permitting that aren't currently there. Any other comments that people have about the rules? If not, I'm going to turn it over to Terry for a couple of other requirements for the rulemaking process.
So the next topic that we have is the potential fiscal and economic impact of this rulemaking. So I would ask everyone to think about the rulemaking is required for this bill. And so we're required to ask of any potential fiscal or economic impact that might result from this new rule. So as we roll this rule out, again, this is just in draft form. We're not looking at implementing till early spring. Are there any additional costs or requirements on your local jurisdiction or municipality? Go ahead, Jonathan.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
So yeah, there would be additional costs to the municipality. It's making it mandatory for all jurisdictions to have it. Obviously, ones like us that have already adopted this early, we would have less likely impacts. But I know going to the extremes that we're looking at, even for 2C, purchasing, technology that can be capable of doing those in the field things, looking at portable tablets, phones, whatever, in addition to what the staff may have had before. So we have that additional cost. Obviously, there's the current state model for e-permitting, so there can be minimal cost for the actual permitting system. There's some of those on that way, but can be considerable cost if they decide to do it on their own for self-hosted style software. For the public, not likely to have a lot of impact on that. If anything, savings for our listeners. It's for anecdotally, our counter's a lot slower in-house. It's electronic and stuff like that because they can do everything from their office. They don't need to come see us.
So Jonathan, unfortunately, you've all through this, and you've been a little bit tough to hear. So I'm going to repeat back what I think I heard for Terry's benefit, since she's taking notes, and correct me if I get it wrong. But what I heard was, what I heard Jonathan say was that there would be some financial impacts, obviously for a jurisdiction that doesn't have a system, they do have the option of e-permitting, which would not cost them for the system itself. But even so, even for a jurisdiction like that, if they're going to use any of the tools for the inspectors in the field, so that hardware type of cost would potentially be a cost. You didn't think that there were costs for the general public in the implementation of this, and that per individual jurisdictions, sometimes there's a balancing less cost in terms of the in-house staffing costs because of the decreased foot traffic. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you. I was like, oh, I didn't hear that part. Yes. Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Okay, do you see any additional cost on any particular businesses with this rule? Okay, Randy?
I would just kind of like to circle back to the having the capability to look at plans electronically in the field. When we started out in electronic plan review in the mid 2000s, we bought iPads for everyone and used a foldable, just an older phone to create a hotspot for it. We found that with all these systems, it was quite a bit of money monthly per inspector, and we went to just smartphones now. So we really do not have the real estate size to display a very complex plan in the field. We do and have accepted electronic plan of view, like I said, since the mid 2000s. But what we have worked out with our local home builders association is that even though it's reviewed electronically, it is transmitted electronically, ultimately we would like at least an 11:17 color copy in the field, because it shows our red markups, it shows engineering. We find that we have a better product that we go out to inspect because we have more clear information. I don't think the contractors are ready for displaying electronic plans large enough for framers and subs to work on them yet. You know, it's just not the cards at this point. So that is the way we've went, is working with our stakeholders. We require a minimum of 11:17 in color, and they could have full-size sheets in black and white, but we want to really differentiate the markups we put on there because it's critical for a timely, well-constructed, safe, sanitary, durable home.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Is there anybody else? Okay, do you see any additional cost with training to implement or comply or with enforcement? No, I don't think enforcement would be in this rule, but with training and implementation of this new rule? I don't see anyone. With this new rulemaking, would you believe that the actions and products are more or less expensive? Hey, no comment.
Maybe you're asking if these requirements might increase the cost of a municipality. Is that kind of what we're?
Yeah, if the new rulemaking and these particular actions or products are more or less expensive for the local jurisdiction. Sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Just from the software side purely, if you don't have software today, you could go onto the state system or to any other system, you're going to pay some implementation, whether it's internal resources for your staff or a consultant or project manager. There's going to be some implementation cost, I would assume.
Okay.
It has allowed us to convert our sliding file room into a mail room because we are no longer retaining all these plans. We find that, everyone nowadays has smart devices and tablets and computers. So I don't think the customers' costs have necessarily increased. In fact, they no longer have to print large size plans this way. And so I think it's a wash, if anything, and it is the direction we're going, right? We need to embrace it at some point.
Thank you, Randy. Is there anything? Oh, sorry, Brian.
Yes, thank you. Brian Krieg. I represent many of the contractor organizations and union trade, construction trades. And from our contractor standpoint, the better efficiencies we're going to be having, the faster communications, other elements to this overall are going to help us actually lower some costs and make all of us more responsive and move our projects along a lot quicker. So there may be some costs that the cities are going to have. We may see some reflection in that, but we think on the backside for us, we will see some decreases. And I'd like to thank everybody for working on this and their input on it. And I know this was a very complex issue to put together. In 2003, first ask Darlene Hooley, our congresswoman from kind of in the southeast Portland area, for funds for BCD to start down this path on electronic permitting. And it's quite wonderful at this point to see how much progress everyone in the state has made on this. So thank you.
Thank you. So the last question that I have are, what are the potential impacts on racial equality in the state by this rulemaking? This is a question that's required now of all rulemaking in Oregon, the state of Oregon. So if you don't have an answer, that's fine. But if you do, please feel free to raise it at this time. Lee?
Well, I think in some ways it levels the playing field, because then it's like services are available, like you don't have to drive downtown, you don't have to take time off work, like to be an in-person interaction. But at the same time, our minority communities are sometimes less able to access technology. And so I don't know what the answer is, but I think that we can't just offer services online. I think we need to make sure that we're offering services also in a way that people can access them. And our non-English speaking customers also need to be able to access services as well. And I don't see like a requirement to offer in multiple languages, although I may have missed that in the read. That would be a really big lift if it was in there. But I think that we need to consider our different customer groups and how we interact with them and how we can make sure that we're serving them. But I don't unfortunately have any good answers to that.
Thank you, Lee. That's really great information. Okay. So next steps.
So next steps, we'll take some of the comments back. There are a couple places that you all have identified for some tweaks to the rulemaking language. We will make those changes and send them out to the group, I believe, for any additional comment. It sounds though like we're on pretty good track for filing the rules for the April 1st, or maybe it's the 15th. One or the other. And then next steps, we will be producing, and thank you for all the participation in this process through the rulemaking. And we've had many discussions about different types of items, some of the surveys that we did of the contractors and the design professionals, some of the discussions about licensing, the interaction with utilities. We're going to be producing kind of a document that captures some of those discussions. And then we will also be sending out to this original group and then perhaps also to the larger group to gauge the interest in having some discussions about producing some best practices guides. So for example, one of the things that was identified when we did the survey of the design professionals was some frustration with the different requirements at different jurisdictions, for the naming of plans, the submittal of plans, all of that stuff. I don't think it's, we are not in the place and do not want in these rules to designate what the requirements should be. And I think it would take a lot of work to get everybody on the same page. And that's probably something that it would require you all as jurisdictions to participate in that discussion to see if we could put together some consistent standards, aspirational standards for people to work towards. We are happy at BCD to help facilitate those discussions, but I think those discussions definitely would require, that jurisdictional participation to try to see if we could make some agreement on that. So we'll send out some emails to gauge the interest in participating in something like that. Again, I think I mentioned earlier on, we do have some follow-up things that we promised to provide about some licensing stuff. I think the utilities had asked for a couple of things that I think have actually already provided to them, but we will follow up on that. And then in that documentation of some of the discussions, again, looking towards some best practices. I know that there are some things that we do in e-permitting. We did not want to bring them to the group as, again, requirements, but there are some simple things that we do that I could see that would be helpful if those who are on other systems would do. For example, having consistent names throughout the state for mechanical fixtures or plumbing fixtures, so that no matter where you go, you understand what a water closet is, if that was the word that we were using, right? Or, what those fixtures are. And the same thing, it would be nice, the inspection list that we have on e-permitting was developed with the e-permitting jurisdictions, and actually early on with some of our basic service jurisdictions. So some folks who are no longer on e-permitting, including like the city of Portland, et cetera, we developed that original inspection list. And it would be nice maybe if that was something that, again, we have that out there as a best practice thing. If jurisdictions, when implementing a new system, if it's not e-permitting, might think about adopting some of that, so that contractors throughout the state, have a consistent set of inspection names and a consistent set of fixture names. And again, that also just helps electronically as folks move between systems, if there is some kind of streamlining on that. So in that document of kind of a report on what we've done, we'll probably put some of those, again, best practice suggestions, aspirational things that we're doing in e-permitting that we would love to see jurisdictions adopt that are not making those required. Go ahead, David, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to bring this up just before we ended. But there was supposed to be kind of like a gathering, a group put together to discuss maybe best practices for video inspections.
Yep.
That I don't think has happened yet. And I would like to see that move forward. I think that, we can't put the genie back in the bottle on video inspections of we've all utilized them through COVID and some of the smaller jurisdictions because of the logistics and whatnot. But I think it would be very helpful to work our way through that as a group, with the state hopefully facilitating that. I know that the customers expect a lot out of video inspections, and I think that we'd be doing all ourselves a favor to kind of come up with some best practices of how we utilize that moving forward. I just think that it's there's just a lot to consider there, and I think that we could all benefit from having that discussion.
I agree. That was the second thing that I had besides electronic plan review, because that was mentioned, several times. There were a number of suggestions from members of this committee about things that might be appropriate for video inspections, some types of inspections that maybe would be entirely video inspections. And again, I think that we at BCD are very interested in helping to, again, facilitate that discussion for folks, not necessarily as a rulemaking thing, but as a best practice thing. So yes, absolutely. So that's.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Yep. I think that's a wonderful idea. So with that, I think those are kind of our next steps. So adopting, sending out a new set of, taking into consideration the comments provided, doing a tweak to some of the rule language there, filing those rules and hopefully adopting those, and then putting out kind of a report on what's been done and the discussions that we've had, and then a follow-up on gauging some interest for 2 primary best practice discussions, one along the lines of electronic plan review and the other one along the lines of video inspection. So I think that's what I have. Any closing comments, thoughts? I just want to thank everybody. I think we've had some really wonderful and great discussions in the process of this. It's been great to hear the feedback and get a lot of really great engagement on this. So thank you, everybody, for participating.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.